All right, Joseph Heiland is a writer from upstate New York. He has stories published at Eastern Iowa Review, Lumina Journal, and Read Magazine. He received an MFA in fiction from Sarah Lawrence College and is currently earning his PhD in English at Binghamton University. Please welcome Joey.
Thank you, Suzanne. I just want to say before I get into it that as someone who went to I went to Ithaca College for my undergrad, and so having attended this on the other side of it, just as a student who was super curious and interested in folks who had made somewhat of a life in writing, it's both amazing and also pretty surreal to be here. And so I'm just very grateful for the opportunity. Some of the things that Suzanne said really stood out to me, and I really appreciated the way that she phrased it in describing that want to be expansive rather than reductive. Um, I very much feel as though, intentionality is everything with writing. I'm a fiction writer, and so that's kind of my where I devote the most of my energy. But it definitely applies in other genres too. And of course, that is always the case. That's not a novel idea, but I'm especially fascinated with the idea of the writer as curator, and the ways in which the writer can navigate various landscapes or various types of landscape in order to convey something about a story or a character or whatever they're engaging with. I had intended to read and then chat about that writing a little bit or about my process, but based on Suzanne's example, I feel as though it might be better to chat a little bit and then do my reading towards the end. And so I'm gonna again take a little page from her book, and I'm gonna post the link to the document that I'm gonna be working from. I just sent that into the chat. I'm going to likewise share my screen. But just in case that doesn't work so well, folks will have the ability to, join in and keep tabs on what's going on. And so I will share my screen just so we can get into that. All right, hopefully everybody can see this. All right, and so like I said, I am not going to be reading my piece first. I'm going to be chatting a little bit. So I feel as though different landscapes offer distinct opportunities for the writer to illuminate thematic elements of their work, what characters observe, and then how they perceive those observations, how they react to them, informs the reader of that character's, insecurities, their dreams, everything that haunts them. Um, by tapping into the three landscapes that I've identified, so the physical, the human, and the internal, in a real conscious way, I feel allows the writer to unearth facets of their characters, their stories, their poems, in ways which would otherwise, and of course, which inevitably in the end remain subconscious or subtextual. I think that Suzanne was absolutely right in wanting to get things across without overtly spelling everything out. And so I'm especially drawn to writing that requires some reading between the lines. So you're, as a writer, dropping breadcrumbs and then you're letting the reader pick them up at their own discretion. I feel as though it's the writer's job to curate meaningfully, so to pick and choose aspects of the various landscapes, the physical, the human, and the internal, in ways that showcase, stuff that isn't just like aesthetically beautiful or lyrical, things that would like sound nice, although I definitely absolutely strive for that in my work too. But they need to, serve that dual purpose. So there needs to be a focus on the aesthetic of the writing, but that writing should also serve to reflect the writer's intentions with whatever they're creating. And so the different landscapes offer different tools for the writer in the same way that, a mountainous region described would function differently than a coastal one or a bustling city. And I feel like that can also be applied to the human or internal landscapes that I talked about. So obviously, when you're describing, the physical world around you, that's going to require that level of curation, a sense of curation. But I think that there's also lots of merit in really focusing on both the human landscape that surrounds your work, your characters, as well as the introspection that they use to provide that like deeper insight into their thought process, but also the writer and what they're striving for thematically. And so who the writer and by extension, or sorry, who the narrator and by extension who the writer decides to place in a particular scene or what a character articulates through their introspection reveals something that's really important about the story or the poem at large. And so when selected purposefully, the reader gains deeper insight into not only, who the narrator is, but what the story or poem is reaching for in a grander sense. And so I feel like, and this is, I know, a goofy picture, but whereas, everybody's going to be chatting about, ways in which we can tap into our own experiences with particular landscapes. I know that this is all about, how we as writers from New York, or at least who are living in New York currently, how we're taking and drawing from those inspirations. But I kind of just want to also emphasize that while it is especially useful to tap into our own settings where we live, where we're from, it's potentially risky in other ways, in that we as writers can opt to use details which aren't especially meaningful in serving the story or the poem, but which more so reflect our own gaze. And I think that, again, Suzanne was really, really spot on in emphasizing the need to be careful with how you use place. And she was talking about among other things, like appropriation, and wanting to be authentic in your portrayal of those spaces. But I think also just from the standpoint of wanting to express something clearly in your writing, of pushing for a particular narrative, theme, takeaway, it very much behooves the writer to at least try to distance themselves, to dissociate from what they would observe or from what they would like to read about in a particular scene, and instead choose details, marks of time and place and character, which mostly serve the story and not like their own ego or their own history. And so with that in mind, I'm going to spend a minute or two reading from a story of my own, if I'm able to. Hopefully I am. Let's go back here. All right. And so this is from a story that I had written. It's called The Clean Slate. And hopefully everybody can see the text on the page. I'm going to scroll through a couple of slides. The gist for this story is that there's a young woman named Molly who has a tumor on her neck, and she very much would like to get rid of that tumor, and so is journeying to a healing event where some miracle worker is supposedly going to take care of that for her. She won't have to, get chemo or go to surgery. The healer is just going to make the problem go away. And so this takes place a few days into her journey. And I'm going to have to swivel this so that I can see the page. Okay, cool. The bus skidded away. Across the aisle, a boy watched cartoons on a green dinosaur tablet, and a woman reading the paper nodded off. First light simmered behind the clouds. Another woman scoffed, shook her head. The boy made a face at Molly, who puffed her cheeks, crossing one eye. He was gangly, with a buzz cut. Back and forth they posed, until without warning, his gaze shifted inward and a geyser of vomit rocketed from his thin lips. Everybody off! Outside, the driver, a woman in her 70s with a buttery perm, steeled herself and re-entered the bus, cursing. Just dandy, gotta clean this up. Don't retire, Frank said. It's pocket money, we'll go to Vegas. Never worked a day in his life. Beyond the road was a lake wrapped in a picket fence. Her teeth chittered. Crumpled soda cans were jumbled on the shoulder. The driver's head bobbed with her cleaning, and Molly wondered if Frank was alive, if he'd always been a leech like her, and folks walked around wishing he'd die already. I know that look. She spun to find Catman shivering, bouncing Cleo in his jacket. I'm just going to aside say that Catman is a character in the story who is only known for the fact that he is constantly walking around with his cat. Just throwing that out there. Who was bouncing Cleo in his jacket. You ever hear your name and assume people are rolling their eyes? I don't know, maybe. He laughed. Prose landed on the power line, squawked, and flew away. She adjusted her scarf. A crack widened along the edge of the lake, and the driver emerged, spray bottle in one hand, rag in the other. She asked if the boy had any Cheerios left in his system. No? Good. We're losing daylight. Her mom texted a screenshot of the radar. Pink oblong swallowing Montana. Winter storm advisory. On cue, a plow thundered by. Molly envisioned the Angels' plane or chariot, or whatever the fuck Angels took from A to B, crashing in the snow. They arrived in Billings. She had an eerie feeling the buildings were fake, and the trinket store with the gnome in the window was really a drug den or a Nazi front. She glanced at Catman, head back, drooling. The kid with the dino tablet nestled in his father's lap. Bozeman, Deer Lodge. She started a podcast about art thieves, got bored, and ended up on social media. The storm let up. They stopped for gas at a Clinton market where she and Catman hobbled off to stretch their legs. The crescent moon rippled with ozone. She imagined the geezer he'd become. Price is Right, House Full of Strays. He drooped his head. Time to go. She smudged a Picasso-style portrait of herself in the window and scrolled until her phone died. Exit 96 to Missoula. The woman on her left began snoring. She considered asking Catman for the time, but chickened out. They bounced over a pothole. When she looked again, he was pouting, deep in thought. Was it bad she felt lighter having spilled her guts? Maybe that was it. Maybe the angel wasn't a healer, but a vessel, a furnace into which pain was tossed and forgotten, the clean slate. No wonder she didn't fix the world all at once. All right, and so that's the excerpt that I'm going to read. In service of keeping the time somewhat orderly, I'm going to skip. I had actually gone through and marked up according to whether I deemed a particular passage to be one of the, a physical landscape mark, or else a token of the human landscape that surrounds Molly, or else a passage that conveys some bit of her interiority, and so fleshing out that internal landscape that I had described. But since I gave the link to everybody, I'm not going to linger on that. If you're interested in getting a more direct sense of, how I work through determining these things, just check out the slideshow. I'm going to stop sharing my screen though, and thank everybody for, joining again. This has been so wonderful, and I'm going to pass it off to Liz. So let me get out that bio and we will move on. Okay, so Liz Ann Young lives on a small farm with dogs, cats, chickens, and some humans too, on unceded Haudenosaunee and Susquehannock land. She is working towards her PhD at Binghamton University and received her MFA from Vermont College of Fine Arts. She was the long-standing poetry editor of the recently shuttered Atlas plus Alice, and her work has been published by Black Heart, Big Muddy, Tinderbox Poetry, and San Pedro Review, among others. Join me in welcoming Liz Ann Young.
Thank you, Joey. Thanks for being here, everybody. I feel like Joey has led very interestingly into mine because I'm going to talk about Montana. So I don't have anything to share with you. I don't have a presentation and I don't have a link. So you can just sit back and listen. I was planning on reading probably 5 poems. They are from a collection about the ways in which landscape affects relationships, like boyfriend-girlfriend relationships. And so I'm going to actually start out west. I've lived a variety of places in my life. I was born in Michigan. I've lived in Vermont. I've lived in Washington and Montana and upstate New York here, or upper state New York here. So I am going to start in Washington, read a couple poems about Washington, and then move to Montana, and then end up back over here. The first one that I'm going to read is called A History Major. Driving back from breakfast on the coast of Washington, you stopped to pick up a hitchhiker because we have said all the things that we can say to each other. Her wool cap straddled a swarm of white hair, rushing around itself like the foaming waves behind her. You asked her where she was going. She said, "I'm a history major," as if there was only one place any historian could ever go from this moment on Chuckanut Road, halfway between Seattle and Vancouver. She got in. We moved on. She told us the president didn't want her to have her cool menthols, how the gas station attendants are told to hide them from her, how it was worse under Bush, better under Clinton. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had this inheritance. She didn't touch it, she swears, but that meant that she couldn't go to homeless shelters or receive government aid. But there was a motel in Anacortes that she knew. She just couldn't remember the name right now and didn't have any money, but she wanted to go there anyway. And did we know the name of it? Your boyfriend dropped her off at the cheapest motel he knew, unloaded her luggage, and drove away. So yeah, in my pieces, I definitely I spend a lot of time making sure that I'm writing very particularly about place and very particularly about very specific people that exist in those places and are like created and affected by the ways in which those places are manifesting. So the next one that I'm going to read, I lost it for a second. La, la, la. There we go. It is this one we move further east to Spokane, Washington, which if you've never been to Washington, there's like the Seattle side, then there's a bunch of mountains that are a really big barrier, and then there's just like huge open expanse of like random dams generating electricity and apple orchards, and it's just a very interesting landscape. So this one is called After the Harvest in Eastern Washington. Your boyfriend's suit doesn't fit as he practices his best man's speech, drooping ironed shoulders disappearing into the cherry orchard under heavy branches. It is late August, so the harvest would be over before you all appeared in dresses and ties, sinking your heels into the dirt. The migrant workers have gone, only the drooping, rotting bunches left and cabins with piles of mattresses waiting for next year. Drunk, buzzing from the music, the dancing, the coke, what hasn't happened yet, you wake up too early in those small family, not sheds, to the sun between the boards, hung over. And in a corner, you find a Spanish book about bunnies and mothers who love, snuggled under your wine-stained spaghetti straps. Weep on the drive home through the mountains. Your boyfriend will turn up the music and spit pits out the window. So as we continue our journey east, I am going to read my first poem about Montana, which is also a very particular landscape. The place that I lived in Montana was north of where Joey's character ended up. So it's an hour north of Missoula, which is right near Glacier National Park in a town called Columbia Falls. And I so far have been unable to fully capture what it's truly like there in a poem because it is quite a particular experience. This one is called Your New Boyfriend Teaches You to Shoot. He takes the road and calls it less traveled, north where the pavement ends, but not gravel, go to dirt. Go to ruts crushed by mud-splashed pickups till grass brushes undersides. He looks over at your hair blowing because the AC's busted, and he smiles a bit. He drives you up packed dust and keeps going. About a 2 beers drive past the gas station, sweat thick on cracked seats. He cracks a space between spines and needles and spindleless pines, pining, piercing clouds emptied of time. He scouts spaces where prey hides. He stops his rusted metal box in a clearing with a berm. He pretends he just found it, even though you're the 7th pair of hips to fit tiny in his old work pants and step over this shell-filled rot log. He throws down the tailgate, pulls out the black metal pieces, lines them up, fills them up, arms you. One more swig for good luck, then points you away and presses to you, sliding rough-heeled palms on smooth bones before him, and cheeks and ears and breath and pause, and count 1, 2, 3, 4. He scuffles in the rubble after, says not too bad for your first time, but doesn't take off his sunglasses. All the birds have flown away, so you'll say something. And he reaches in the window and turns the radio to someone else's voice. All right, next. Which one was next? Why do I keep losing them? My heavens. This one is about the transition from Montana to upstate New York and those different landscapes and the ways that they create a different kind of people. This one is titled Afterwards. I am the uneven, wave-whipped wings of a bat-bitten Luna moth. I am a furry, mouthless face. I am the moon. I am what is left. I am a green so soft I am silent. But I miss what the high desert made me think. The different way barns fell down there with their boards bleached like beached driftwood, leaning quietly to the alpenglow's bruise. I joined what the men left to the sun. Rusted cast iron pans, broken chains, threadbare tires, what no one bought at the garage sale, what you should have left behind the last time you moved, what you stomp into the dust long after it's dead, raging grit into your mouth until you cough up blood, what sets flames with caustic black smoke and always says, fuck you in particular. In a midnight sawdust bar with plastic shot glasses, I became someone who knows what the edge of want smells like, who learned to chase it down like a triple-collared bloodhound ears deep in scent. But the season always came when exes fill up texts with emojis to ask about a pet we used to share and other bullshit that smells stronger when the days start to sizzle out of burnt prairie grass. I set fire to people who should know better and still fit into my tightest pants. The wreckage is not there. I am dreaming this all. They burned down everything but my house. Their snake-long limbs still live in the space before I wake up, reaching across my living room rug, picking up black hair and dried mud on their way to say things they have always said and keep on saying. My eyes are closed regardless. Here, my biggest fear is the fox for my chickens, of speckled feathers squawking through wet teeth, but I can yell loud enough to scare her away, especially now. I borrow a neighbor's horse and teach myself to ride it between stone foundations, even at night, even without a saddle, even without apologizing. And finally, I have one last piece about the types of farmhouses you find all over around here in the rainy seasons. This is called Ode to an Old Farmhouse in the Rain, and it's dedicated to my personal old farmhouse that is 200 years old and hanging on for dear life. I will find the axe head in your crawl space and polish its rust. I will trim the rot from your beams for you. On hot, close nights at your tilted doorways, I can feel how you have ached for spires to pierce the flooding sky. How many storms have thundered your roof, crashing sheets and loose limbs and torn off leaves? You waited, let them rage. Dark moisture-buckled floorboards catch my toes, but I forgive nail pops, wrap jade-speckled pothos around their heads. For 200 years, your cedar shakes have watched goldenrod fields, monarchs who visit only to fly away. No one asked, but you have odes to herringbone, tools to fix your plinth. You tell ghosts until the living listen. You will creak and groan, though men try to sleep. They will wake afraid while you dream of transoms, of rib vaults, of arches. Silence paints ceilings for you. Hands have moved your walls through lath, through plaster. The mud outside always finds a way in. You never chose beige flowered wallpaper or the constant water dragging strong, stacked rocks from foundation to moss. If the rain dries up, I will slice painted window frames. Let breeze slide east to west. I will cry. I will level you. Thank you. All right, next up, we have Jessie. All right. Jessie earned an MA in English Literature from the University of South Florida in 2022. They are currently a third-year English Literature PhD at Binghamton University, where they're studying 20th century American comic books. Their creative work in both fiction and creative nonfiction explores the body in relation to the landscape. Welcome, Jess.
Thank you so much. Hopefully we can all hear me okay. I'm so excited to be here. So I also don't have a PowerPoint or any kind of document to share with you guys. I really just want to kind of spend some time reading some of my own work. So I'd like to read some excerpts from a creative nonfiction essay that I'm currently working on, which explores my experiences growing up in Central Florida, kind of moving around the Tampa region, and the ways in which kind of over the years, I lived there for, I think, almost 20 years. I kind of watched the landscape change and evolve over time, mostly due to the effects of climate change. So I'd like to kind of read this essay exploring that, as well as how I've seen myself change as I grew up alongside the landscape. So I realized that I was in the LGBTQ community at a really young age, and I feel like that really impacted my relationship with the landscape and the nature around me, and kind of the way that I perceived myself as kind of an organism in that landscape. So my essay pulls a little bit from queer theory as well, because I have kind of a literature research background. So I quote a little bit of queer theory as part of my discussion and exploration kind of this very unique landscape that you get in Florida. And I'm also really interested in kind of the blurring of the line between like an individual human person and the ecosystem that they're existing within. So I'm kind of playing around with all of these different ideas, but I'll just jump right into it. So I had just turned 6 years old when we moved from temperate North Carolina to the sweltering city of Tampa, Florida. And though I don't remember a moment of it, on the long drive down, I must have watched the passing forests with a keen eye, seen the underbrush double in size, and noticed as the maple, sweet gum, beech, and cedar trees turned to palm, cypress, dogwood, and slash pine. The drive, which I've now made countless times, offers a horror movie of sorts. The further south you go, the more the kudzu vines invade and zombie over the forests, draping itself over the tree line, subsuming the wilderness to its sprawl. It casts the lot of Florida in rich greens and shadows, hiding the shape of trees beneath it like a sheet thrown over furniture to prevent the dust from settling. Florida is full of things that aren't meant to be there. So many people released their pet Burmese pythons into the wild, or into a wild in which they have no natural predators, that the state declared an official python challenge, a 10-day hunting spree, after which, in 2024, $10,000 were awarded to the man who killed the most pythons, and $1,000 was awarded to whoever caught the longest. In the South, invasive iguanas that are also imported as pets and then released when they grow too large for their owners to handle overeat vegetation and undermine the stability of human structures like sidewalks and patios by burrowing beneath them. At night in the winter, when the hot equator sun dips beneath the horizon and temperatures fall, their bodies go into shock and they drop from their trees like toppled mannequins. I too felt like something invasive, something out of its natural habitat. I was, as I was often lauded, mature for my age. I was always the biggest student in my elementary school class and had to start wearing a training bra in the second grade. By the age of 8, I was taller than my mother. The reassurance that I could be a basketball player or a supermodel did little to comfort me when every beautiful woman in the movies or on TV had a love interest taller than her. When I was raised in the early 2000s diet culture where a synonym for pretty was practically small. So I grew to feel like something not quite human. And maybe that would have bothered me more if I hadn't grown up watching Animal Planet on daytime television, teaching myself to crawl across our carpet like a lion stalking its prey, to howl at our popcorn ceiling like wolves, and to gallop instead of run. I was the creature of flesh that I let myself be, concerned most with rolling in mud and eating the meat off bones. The closest I got to human aspiration was wanting to be a veterinarian and I still wonder how much of that desire was a longing to care for myself. Queer scholar and theorist Jose Muñez defines wildness as the spirit of the unknown in the disorderly. Fellow scholar and theorist Jack Halberstam writes that wildness in Muñez's work describes the space and modes of knowing and unknowing that emerge in the encounter between capital and chaos, privilege and struggle, myth and countermyth. Halberstam goes on, queerness is what keeps the horizon at bay and what runs to greet it. The wildness manages the space between here and now, then and there, and names what comes after nature, after queerness and before the world they have dreamed. While I was too young to know what queerness was then, I found myself constantly and consistently drawn to the edges of things, to the trees that framed my yard, to the forest behind the school, to the shore of the lake where the alligator lived, its behemoth hide a dark form in the water. The wildness of both Florida and myself seemed to be the only space expansive enough for the wholeness of me to be truly held. When I was 8 years old, the magnolia tree in my suburban backyard had the perfect bowed branch on which to sit. My overgrown body would pull itself up into the tree's limbs, dusty with dirt and fungus, and nest itself into that tree's cradle, that perfect fork in its arms. Sometimes I'd take books up with me, pinching paperbacks with the same hand I was scrambling upwards with, arriving bruised but intact. I'd sit back and read between the shadows of the leaves, 20 feet up into the sky, my two long legs dangling in the hot, wet Florida air. All year, I'd watch the magnolia seed pods drop like dud grenades into the grass, their shriveled brown husks thumping softly against the earth like fresh baby birds. The seeds were bright red and shaped like lima beans, begging to be eaten. Their skin was soft and malleable, not unlike my own, but almost gummy in consistency. A persistent nail could dig crescents into them or peel back the red flesh to discover something underneath. Sometimes I'd slip the seeds into my pockets and let them litter the floor of my bedroom or float in the soapy bathwater with me. For whatever reason, they felt like little secrets that I carried in child's purses and pencil cases. On days when I would return home from school, rattled with mortification at my own body, I would go into the yard and let the magnolia tree cradle my shame, my body weeping in its arms. How stupid and simple to feel betrayed by your own body. That same body that had pulled me into trees and swum me through rivers and run me through forests. And as I grew older, I was finding out for the first time that it was a body I could not control, that my body would render me human whether I wanted it to or not.